Peace. What's happening, good people? This gift here for Pay Us No Mind. And let's talk about how Universal Music Group and Deezer are set to reshape streaming royalties. Now, Universal Music Group and Deezer have crafted a new streaming royalty model that changes how artists get paid for streams on Deezer. This model could possibly become the standard and spread across all streaming platforms, so it's important to understand. And here are the details. Artists with over 1,000 streams from 500 individual listeners will now have every stream multiplied by 2. So one stream will count as 2. On-demand streams, which take place when the user actively clicks the play button on a song or album, will also be multiplied by 2. Every on-demand stream from an artist above the threshold of 1,000 streams and 500 individual listeners will count as 4. So one stream will count as 4 for artists above that threshold of having 1,000 streams from 500 individual listeners and getting on-demand streams. Currently, streaming platforms pay artists based on a pooling system. The revenue generated from subscriptions and ads, if that's included in the model, are pooled together. Artists are paid a percentage of that revenue based on their percentage of the total number of streams. As an example, let's imagine that Spotify generated $1,000 in revenue and there were a total of 1,000 streams. If you got 100 streams, you accounted for 10% of the total number of streams, so you got 10% of the revenue, which would be $100. Now, let's split this revenue between 3 artists and see how that all shakes out. You got 1,000 streams in total. You got $1,000 in revenue, split between 3 artists. Artist A got 700 streams, so they get 70% of the revenue, which would be $700. Artist B got 200 streams, so they get 20% of the revenue, which would be $200. Artist C got 100 streams, so they get 10% of the revenue, so they get $100. Now with this new system, let's imagine artist A met both qualifiers and got all of their streams quadrupled. Artist B met one of the qualifiers and got their streams doubled. And artist C met none of the qualifiers, so their streams stayed the same. Artist A would see his 700 streams multiplied by 4 and turn to 2,800 streams. Artist B would see his 200 streams multiplied by 2 and turn to 400 streams. And artist C, his streams, his sad little 100 streams, would stay the same. So the total amount of streams would increase to 3,300 streams in total. So artist A, 2,800 streams would equal 85% of the revenue, so he would move from $700 to $850, an increase of 21%. For artist B, his 400 streams would represent 12% of the revenue and pay him $120. So he would go from getting $200 to $120, a decrease of 40%. And artist C, his 100 streams would now only count for 3% of the revenue. So he'd only get $30, down from $100. So he would get a decrease of 70%. It's literally a reverse Robin Hood. They're saying artist A deserves more money because they made the most money, and artist C deserves less money because they made the least. Artist A gets a 21% increase, while everyone else gets a decrease in revenue between 40% and 70%. Now, what drives on-demand streams? What drives on-demand streams is interest, which is driven by awareness, of which major record companies have the best means to produce. A record company can get an artist in rotation on mainstream radio stations, get their songs placed in movies, TV shows, commercials, dedicate large budgets to massive advertising and influencer campaigns. They can get releases featured on a homepage of all of the streaming platforms, get their songs placed in all of the major playlists across all of the major and minor and minor streaming platforms. The on-demand streams aren't so much a form of a buy-in by the listener, but are more so exploratory and discovery-based. You open up Spotify, and the app shows you albums it thinks you'll like. Clicking to explore those albums count as on-demand streams, but that doesn't speak to your level of affection for what you've heard. What happens after that does. So what matters is, do you save that song to your library? Do you playlist that song? Do you stream that song repeatedly? Should music users stream once out of curiosity, hate, and never stream again, receive quadruple the amount of music they playlist and stream repeatedly? Simply because that music has under 500 monthly listeners. Imagine if iTunes, instead of paying artists for each individual download, pooled the revenue from sales, then chose to split that revenue based on which songs got the most 30-second previews and not sales. If the goal is to reward music users value most, why not double the value of repeat streams? Here's why. Under the first iteration of user-centric payout, streaming would have paid artists a percentage of an individual user's subscription fee based on how often their music was streamed by that individual listener. So my $10 subscription fee would pay an artist $9 per month if I personally streamed their music 90% of the time. Under that user-centric model, the top 10 artists saw a 17% drop in their streaming revenue, meaning that music didn't stick to the listener's ribs. It ran through them like fast food. Now, we've reached my favorite new segment, and that is What He Said, where we go over people's quotes and compare them to their actions. This quote is from Universal Music Group's chief, Lucian Grange. He said, "Under the current model, the critical contributions of too many artists, as well as the engagement of too many fans, are undervalued." Now, how is reducing the revenue of the artists that make the least by possibly 70% increasing the value of contributions of artists? An artist with 300 listeners generating 10,000 streams monthly would get 2 times less than an artist with 1,000 streams from 1,000 listeners. How's that increasing the value of the contribution of fans? The artist with the more dedicated fan base gets their pay sliced in half. Now, here's another quote. "This is a massive change in the way music will work," said Deezer chief executive Geronimo Folguera. "We have 90 million tracks, and many of them are just noise, like literally noise, the sound of a washing machine in rain. It is fundamentally wrong that 30 seconds of the recording of a washing machine gets paid the same as the latest single by Harry Styles," he said. "So, it's fundamentally wrong if a product legitimately supplies an existing demand and gets fairly compensated for it because it takes money away from a greedy corporation that feels it deserves more simply because it exists. It's fundamentally wrong to pay a product what the market says it's worth." The key point here is that people choose what they want to hear on these platforms. This isn't radio where a programmer decides and listeners can only change the station. If someone is streaming the sound of a washing machine, it's because they like hearing the sound of a washing machine. Is it fair for the $10 of a subscriber paying to stream the sound of rain uninterrupted to go to Harry Styles simply because he's Harry Styles? Now, this quote is in reference to the amount of artists this would impact. So they say only 2% of all uploaders to Deezer, i.e. artists, have more than 1,000 monthly unique listeners on the service. Meanwhile, the top 3% of uploaders generate 98% of its streams, with the other 97 only accounting for 2%. So, under the current system, getting 98% of the total number of streams means you get 98% of the revenue. They're saying with this new system that someone that already gets 98% of the revenue deserves quadruple the amount that they already get with getting 98% of the revenue. Basically, whoever makes the most money gets more money because they made the most money. Only 2% of artists would qualify for the benefits of their system. This means 98% of artists releasing music to Deezer will receive a 70% decrease in their royalties. Here's another quote. The goal is to reduce the money flowing towards amateurs, bots, and white noise soundtracks. Goldman Sachs estimates the long tail of such content generated about $900 million in royalties last year. So just to extend that quote with another quote, we need an updated model, he writes, not one that pits artists of one genre against artists of another, or major label artists against indie or do-it-yourself artists. We need a model that supports all artists, do-it-yourself, indie, and major, versus this quote right here that I just read, which states that they want to reduce money flowing to amateurs, which by their designation is likely over 90% of do-it-yourself artists. The move would ensure we are better supporting and rewarding artists at all stages of their careers, whether they have 1,000 fans or 100,000 fans or 100 million fans, Nas said. You gotta be kidding me. Artists at all stages of their careers who have at least 1,000 fans. Yo, you've got to wonder if these folks are too busy talking to think about what they're saying. Finally, Deezer said this morning that streams tagged as noise accounted for around 2% of streams on its service. These are tracks that will be replaced by its own content in the functional music space, which won't be included in royalty calculations. Basically, the content has value, but they don't want to pay for it, so they're going to replace it with their own to supply the consumer demand without having to compensate anyone by restricting competition. It's like a supermarket banning all bargain brands and replacing them with the store brand version, like Whole Foods 360 peanut butter or something. I think the Sherman Act would like to have a word. Mr. Sherman, Antitrust Act, please take it away. This law prohibits conspiracies that unreasonably restrain trade. Under the Sherman Act, agreements among competitors to fix prices or wages, rig bids, or allocate customers, workers, or markets are criminal violations. Under agreements such as exclusive contracts that reduce competition may also violate the Sherman Antitrust Act and are subject to civil enforcement. Streaming royalty models cannot be controlled by major record companies who only seek to increase the revenue flowing to them. They are not out to create a fair system. They are out to create a system that puts more money in their pockets. And they do not care who they take money from. Today, it could be artists who decide to go into a forest somewhere and stick up a boom mic and record the sound of rain. Tomorrow, they could say, hey, we're still not getting the revenue we want. So we want to eliminate spoken word, or we want to eliminate artists under X amount of streams, like not reduce their revenue, but just stop paying them because we want more money. If we allow what they're doing now to continue unchallenged, then they just have full reign to decide what is and isn't music. And that is a dangerous precedent. Now, y'all can always agree to disagree, share your thoughts and opinions in the comments. As always, y'all can hit me up at Payusnomind on Instagram, at Payusnomind on Twitter. This is Gift signing off. Pay us no mind. Peace, good people. One.